Anyway, with me tonight is Dr. Goku. Say hi.
Hi, everyone.
He is part of Project Guardians here on Twitch. If you guys don't know what Project Guardian or who Project Guardians are, you guys should be checking them out. If I have that right, it is just twitch.tv/Project Guardians, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So easy enough to find, guys. Can you tell us a little bit more about what Project Guardians does?
Well, we're a nonprofit that do mental health support. So we do peer support and psychoeducation for people that join our Discord. We also have a podcast that is the St. 14 Project podcast that happens bi-weekly, where we'll discuss a variety of mental health topics. I typically do a character breakdown and psychoanalysis, and we go into that week's gaming news and whatever's going on in the community. On our off weeks, we have our Let's Talk stream, where the mental health team of Project Guardians get together and talk about various topics of mental health. And we also do charity streams to benefit a variety of mental health organizations and nonprofits.
Awesome, you guys. That is not the right. I did not type in the right link and I feel like a butt. But it is twitch.tv/Project Guardians. I just can't spell. That's my issue. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we're also on Twitter. You can find us on Twitter, and easiest way is to go on Discord as well.
So your Discord, you said it's education. It's not.
So it's psychoeducation. So we have a bunch of mental health professionals that are within the project, just because of the nature of what we do. We are not your personal therapist. We can help you find a mental health therapist and give you some tools, but we always encourage people to seek out their own mental health professional at that time.
Got it. So it's you guys are gateway mental health professionals.
Exactly. We provide peer support. We can help during crises or on various numbers of crisis hotlines. A lot of our members are going through crisis intervention training. We have a social worker. We have a mental health nurse. We have sometimes we have a mental health pharmacist that joins in as well to kind of chime in on medications if needed. So we have a wide variety of fields covered.
Wow, that's awesome, you guys. So definitely start out with the Twitter, because that's the link I have, and that links out to everything else, including their website. So start out with the Twitter and then go from there. They're a fantastic organization. I was actually on their show at one point, I think last week. There they are. Hi, Project Guardians. Wow. Hi. Thank you so much for the host. I appreciate you. Okay, so now it's time to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Well, I am a resident in psychology. I can go in a little bit more detail into that. So I have a doctorate in clinical psychology, and I'm finishing up my internship. Hopefully be able to pass my exams and later this year to get fully licensed as a psychologist here in the one of the provinces of Canada. I am also the mental health team lead with Project Guardians. And I mainly focus with my clients on anxiety, depression, trauma, with the use of a variety of different approaches. So CBT, DBT, ACT, and more recently using superhero therapy as a way to help a lot of my clients.
That is a great transition. Should I pull up so you guys, Dr. Goku is so cool that we have a presentation in addition to him being on at an interview. So I think it's time for us to pull that up. That's what I think. Give me 1 second. Bam, there it is. Superhero therapy sounds really cool, but also sounds super nerdy. So let's back up and talk about that.
So the way I got into it was mainly when I was working on my thesis, and I worked on that for so many years. I was really interested in comic books and superheroes and everything revolving around pop culture as a kid, as a teen, as an adult.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to see how I could bring or bridge what I loved with those specific characters and help others. Because a lot of those characters were there for me when I was a kid.
What do you mean we're
Right.
there for you? Well, like
Uh,
yeah.
just during some harder times in my life. So during times where I was bullied at school, seeing some characters go through some of the similar things just gave me a sense of hope that I was not alone, even though when you are bullied, sometimes you can really feel alone. And I want to kind of dig into that a lot more. And in my undergrad, I think it was around my second year of undergrad, I watched a documentary. I don't remember the name of it. It was on the History Channel, kind of talking about the history of superheroes. And they touched on someone called Frederick Wortham, who was a psychiatrist back in the 40s and 50s that did a study on young delinquents and the reading material that they had. And what he found and made the correlation was that most delinquents read violent comic books. And as we know as scientists, correlation is
Does
not
not
causation.
equal causation. Yes.
But a lot of people ran with that, and
Yes.
that later led to the development of the CCA, which is the Comics Code Authority, which regulated how comic books were done in North America. So you couldn't have specific things because it would poison the minds of youths.
Oh my god. So I didn't know that this existed at all. I just read my comic books and was happy about it. And this like I mean we have a long history of creating a scapegoat whenever things go mildly not the way we like them to. We try to
Lately, it's
find
video games.
yeah, it's video games now. It was D&D in the 80s, and yeah, there's always some kind of a demon that is like the solution to everything. If only people listened and didn't read those comic books, the world would be peaceful. Yeah, scary music, that was the 90s, Marilyn Manson and everything. Yeah, so they're every
rock music.
Yeah.
So there was Elvis back in the 50s and 60s.
those gyrating hips. Oh,
Exactly.
how there could be no world peace as long as that man was gyrating his hips.
And that led me to kind of think of how those characters helped me and how we could use those characters in a positive light rather than just seeing the negative point of view, because people will often focus on the violence with those characters, the battles that they go through, but not really look into kind of the soul of the character, kind of the meat and potatoes of who that character is, what builds the foundation of who they are and why they do a lot of those things. So started studying that for too many years. And throughout my research, I kind of stumbled upon Dr. Scarlett and started talking with her and exchanging ideas on what I was studying and what she had already done. And it just kind of spearheaded a lot of the things that I did in terms of validated that crazy hypotheses that I had in my young undergrad and grad school mind.
That's awesome.
And in a nutshell, it shows that fictional characters, we call those parasocial relationships. A parasocial relationship was defined by Horton and Hull in 1956, which is a unidirectional relationship that someone has with someone. It was originally found with a TV newscaster because they were always constant there. The news at 6, someone would know that that person was always there.
Right.
And later we veered it off in terms of fictional characters, of how that specific character has a positive influence and what impact can it have on who I am. And the research has shown so many great benefits on what they can do. Ultimately, when we look at a fictional character, we go into what's called a monomyth. That was coined by Joseph Campbell in 1949, using what's called the hero's journey. I know that I gave you the slide of a hero's journey.
Yes.
It's kind of a complicated thing, but it kind of goes through every character, every hero that we know, and kind of hits on a lot of the things that they go through. So it's just a regular person that gets called to an adventure,
Mm-hmm.
go through a threshold, they fall, they transform, and then return to beat the foe or the challenge that they have. That's kind of the small abbreviation of everything. And that specific point of a character that falls, because a lot of people will look at fictional characters as these gods, these people that can do no wrong or cannot fail, but most of them have some sort of flaw, and
Mm-hmm.
that is what links us to them.
Mm-hmm.
We can see their humanity. That similarity is what really connects us to them. They can have a very profound influence on us, and they can also serve as cultural prototypes and guides for a lot of people. A study in 2015 done by a group of Italians, Vasali, Stathi, Giovanni, Capozza, and Trifitelli, studied people that read Harry Potter, and the one that's associated more with the character of Harry Potter compared to Voldemort had a decrease in their prejudices compared to other groups.
So you don't just identify, it kind of works both ways where you identify with a character, but then you also take on their traits, because they, once you've identified with them, then you can say, okay, this is how this person acts in this scenario, so now when I encounter this scenario, I know to act XYZ.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
We'll take them as role models. We all have specific role models that in our lives, where they be fictional or real, and we base our behavior on them. Humans are innately social creatures. We learn to interact with the world through our original tribe, which is our family, and then we expand that to our friends and extended family and so forth. But we learn how to interact with the world through what they do. A psychologist called Alfred Bandura uh, hypothesized that we learn by observing. And he had the experiment called the Bobo doll, where if a child would see their parents or an adult hit the Bobo doll with a bat,
Right, I remember this.
would again go and hit that Bobo doll with a bat. So it's kind of a simplified idea, but we repeat behaviors. We
So
repeat behaviors that serve us, and we won't repeat behaviors that do not serve us.
okay, so then how is that not tied to, and I'm just playing devil's advocate here, but how is that then not tied to, if I say, all right, well, he read about Voldemort and that's, and he's looking at his behavior and he relates to it, hope not, but relates to it somehow, and that's why my kid is misbehaving. So how, like, by that hypothesis, you can almost see the bridge happening. So what's going on there?
What's going to happen with those characters that we define as evil or bad? A lot of people will have those links in terms of the tortured soul. They will feel that they are misunderstood, not necessarily because they want to repeat the behavior, but they'll connect to that character because of the pain. I've met some clients that they identified with the Hulk or they identified with the Joker just because of what they feel inside of wanting to harm others, but them not doing anything, just because they could feel that innate pain within them.
And so how is my identifying, for example, how's my identifying with Joker going to, how do I then get past that? Is there a way past that?
Well, we use the character as a way to open up an understanding to why we may feel that way, to use examples as parallels. So we'll ask the client, okay, why do you identify with the Joker?
Right.
Well, because of X, Y, or Z thing. Okay, well, tell me why you identify with those specific behaviors. Well, because I live through X, Y, or Z situation in my life. Okay, so then we start to dig into that particular feeling or emotion. So those characters are a way to bridge an understanding, create a therapeutic relationship with a lot of clients.
Okay, so it's this idea that like if I don't know how to explain myself, maybe I can tell you know about the Joker and I know about the Joker. And so then if I tell you I feel like the Joker, then you can kind of go from there in extrapolating what could be going on in my head. Is that, am I connecting things?
Yeah.
All right, I'm doing it, guys. I'm doing it. I'm connecting everything. Slowly but surely.
It's asking as to why do you feel like that? Why do you feel that you connect more to that character? And in a way, there are studies that show that when we look at a fictional character, it will help with our social identity. It also plays a buffer role for difficult events like social rejection. People that typically suffer from lower self-esteem will have generally stronger parasocial relationships that emulate what they want to as an ideal self. So they'll use it as a model. And we can see that these parasocial relationships create a reduction in cognitive deterioration when we feel rejected. It also has positive effects on self esteem and mood. And we also perceive them as real relationships. Someone that has a connection with the Joker, they're not really focusing on, oh, the Joker is creating or doing these bad things and killing these people. They're focusing on the similarity that they feel at the core of the character. And a lot of people with the Joker is he's misunderstood.
Right.
If you look back at, well, you can't really trust the Joker with his backstory.
Sure, but we can go to Killing Joke and start there.
Yeah, with the Killing Joke, if you look at his past, you can see that failed comic, the person that was having a rough time in his relationship, doing everything that he could to provide for his family. He just got swept up in a bad situation and later became crazy. So we're not really focusing on Joker being a crazy psychopath, but more on that tortured aspect of the character.
Got it. So it's okay. I think you explained it very well. I don't, because I'm on the verge of like reiterating and so that I understand it, like kind of solidifying my understanding. And I don't know if that's helpful to anybody else. But it's just this idea that we take a piece of the character and we identify with that piece. It's not necessarily with the whole thing, but then that still helps us deal with that part of our personality.
So one thing Dr. Scarlet often mentions is how things kind of evolved for her through the creation of superhero therapy. So she worked a lot with returning war veterans in the United States. And a lot of them identified or said they wanted to be like Superman. And suffering from PTSD, they felt like they had failed because they weren't able to be Superman. But the more you delve, the more you start to reflect on Superman is viewed as a god, but the more you look at the core of the character, you can humanize him a lot more. A hero is not the powers, is doing things because they know that it's the right thing, but it's also doing things despite sometimes knowing that you may not survive or you may not come out of the situation victoriously. So Superman's Achilles heel is kryptonite. Even if he suffers from kryptonite poisoning, Superman is still going to try to go through that battle and fight. So those soldiers started to catch on to that, knowing that they may not have saved everyone in the village, but they tried, they did what they could to the best of their abilities, and that they were heroes in their own way.
So it was important to identify with the character and then identify with that character's kind of downswing and like fall and lifting back up, so that you can kind of, once you've identified with a character, basically you can then identify with their other characteristics if you need to, as a way of either therapy or just in general about how we like take in fictional characters.
Yeah. And most fictional characters, more so on Marvel's side than DC, have those innate flaws. I have a Batman and a Iron Man over there. Iron Man back in the 60s and 70s was an alcoholic.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one of his fatal flaws. Spider-Man was a teenager that didn't really know what he was doing and being bullied all the time. But despite being bullied, he had all of these powers, able to do these extraordinary things.
Right.
So the line from Uncle Ben, with great power comes great responsibility, is Peter could have beat up those bullies if he wanted to, but what purpose would it have served? So taking those lessons and learning that that character went through those hardships similar to me, or insert other character here, and I can also surmount these difficulties myself.
Got it. That's really, and wait, I want to backtrack. Superman complex is a real thing, right? Is it really like, and it stems from like, that's directly us lifting something from comic books, is that right?
Well, Superman complex is someone that feels like they can do anything.
Okay.
Just because Superman is quote unquote invulnerable.
Right.
But when we look, Superman is not invulnerable.
Right.
If there's kryptonite, if there's a red sun, if there's magic, Superman has weaknesses.
Right. Just like all of us.
Exactly. We all have our own weaknesses, but those weaknesses shouldn't define us. We should use them to push us up rather than push us down. And we call that post-traumatic growth.
Oh, okay. You guys, are you ready taking notes?
I'm lecturing, aren't I?
But it's like, no, I don't know. You're answering my questions. I don't know if that's lecturing. Superman equals Goku. They always find ways to break it. I mean, that's true, right? Goku goes kind of through the same thing in his arcs.
Yep.
Yeah. So Kid Carbon asked, how do you know what piece of a character you would identify with? Is it possible to answer that?
Well, it varies from person to person. It's always depending on what you live through in your own life. Not everyone is a carbon copy of everyone else. And sometimes going through specific experiences, you may find characters similar to you that you may not have known. One character that I use a lot with some of the clients that I have that have gone through sexual assault is Jessica Jones.
Right. I remember watching her handle PTSD just in season 1. I remember how that helped me, because at the time I was getting through and getting past. Now I'm considered in remission from PTSD, but at the time I was getting through it, and I was watching it with like, it hit me in a very different way than any other Marvel character had, and it was specifically because of they also depict it very well. They could have done a very poor job, and they usually do, depicting PTSD, but they did a fantastic job showing what a flashback is like, and how that literally can stop her in her tracks, even though she is unstoppable otherwise.
Exactly. So how did you feel with Jessica Jones when you watched that show?
Well, I identified with her, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And seeing her go through that arc, going through what's called the Kilgrave Affect. The Kilgrave Affect is seeing the person that committed a crime against you, but feeling that you can't do anything about it because of their social status.
Oh. And that's called the Kilgrave Affect.
Well, that's what this group of therapists have kind of coined it.
Okay. Because I was like, that sounds, again, a permeating culture very nicely.
Yeah. Just because with Kilgrave, he did all of these things, but could she really do anything about it? Because
Right.
if she spoke out, what would happen to her? Would she fall back under his spell?
Right.
And we see Jessica go through that arc of emotional avoidance, going through PTSD, going through flashbacks and
Right.
panic attacks, and using alcohol as a self-medication. But then using her pain and no longer putting her down, but pushing her up to face against Kilgrave to help someone else, to ultimately become the hero that she already was.
Got it. Bison brings a good point, and I see your questions, guys. Keep asking those questions. Bring them in, bring them in, bring them in. We're Dr. Goku is here to answer them. Bison brings an interesting argument, and I want to kind of dissect it because I'm not sure that I understand the question or the point completely, but I would like to. So the argument is interesting, but I'm bothered by the fact that it's not that they surpass their flaws, but rather that they have some sort of gift that makes them superior to other people, and then they're defined by that. Like, sure, Iron Man is an alcoholic, but that only affects and hurts the people that they love. In the comic, those people stay by them anyway. To the rest of the world, they're modern demigods.
That's true, and depending on the way that you can look at it, it's always depending on the interpretation, and a lot of superheroes are viewed as gods.
Right.
Of about the things that they can do. But we need to look at not just what they can do, but why they do the things that they do.
Mm-hmm.
If we look at Iron Man, so Tony Stark is a billionaire philanthropist,
Playboy philanthropist.
Exactly.
Right.
Most people that would have that amount of money, what would they do? Would they really build an Iron Man suit to save the world?
No, I mean, spend it, right? I mean, I'd pay off my student loans.
Oh, yeah, I would pay mine off too. But most people would just live comfortably and do nothing. But because of what Tony went through, so being captured, being near death with the shrapnel near his heart, changed his view of the world. So through the hero's journey, it's that particular part that we look at. He hit that threshold of going through a transformation. He met his mentor and helper, which was Tenzin, but ultimately hit that rock bottom, but then was rebirthed to a different person. So the Tony Stark that went into the cave was no longer the Tony Stark that came out of the cave.
Right.
Which means if we look at it in a psychological sense, we can all change. We can all go and look at what we had done in the past, but we can still do good in the future. Our past doesn't need to define everything that we do. And with Tony, he was an arms dealer,
right,
but used that to push himself forward. Again, he had billions of dollars to not let anyone get hurt from the technology that he created, and then later help the world. And then if you go through the arc, while some of his ideas are good in theory or might be misguided, we think about Ultron, for example.
Sure. But it isn't at this point that, like, people stick around him even though he hurts them. Everybody gives him a shot. I mean, that must be, as somebody who's, lived with and dealt with mental illness before, like, that's also kind of part of the dream for me, was for people to kind of understand that I'm not feeling well and that I'm not feeling my best, and to stick around anyway. But, I mean, I also didn't make Ultron and didn't destroy an entire country, so... Yeah, I felt a little better about my thing.
But with mental health, a lot of people will often push people away. And with Tony, he did push people away, but people understood that. Again, it's written in comics and it's written in movies. It's not necessarily like real life. But with people, if we open up to the people closest to us, help them understand what we are going through, then there's a far lesser risk of them going away, seeing our behaviors at a surface level, and then later understanding as the whys. Example, I have a client that is a correctional officer, and he suffers from PTSD. So a lot of my correctional officers suffer from PTSD. And he deals with his PTSD in anger. So he has a very short fuse. He will snap. Every sound or anything will set him off. So his family felt that they were walking on eggshells around him to not set him off. And the more work that we do, the more he understood what's going on with him, the more he understood why he would be doing certain things, and then verbalizing that to his family. And then his family understood why he was acting that way. He was seeking treatment. So they were a lot more lenient on specific things that were going on because of it.
I remember having to describe, so I couldn't get my sister to understand depression. She was just like, let's just not talk about it. Don't ask, don't tell kind of thing. And the thing that her and I have in common and always have was Harry Potter. And so one day it occurred to me, because I had read an article where J.K. Rowling talks about the fact that Dementors are representative of depression, and she herself had lived through depression. So she, like, it's literally the Dementor's kiss is literally taking away your ability to feel anything, right? And
I use that example all the time.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And that was how I was able to explain it. I was like, you know how they describe, like, when it approaches you, you just feel terrible, but also feel nothing all at the same time, and it's ultimate
everything becomes
despair.
Gray, dark, cold.
Right. And then you might hear something that other people don't hear, like Harry heard his mother screaming, and so. And that really helps. That made a huge difference, because she was like, well, I get the whole Dementor thing. And I was like, right, but that's what it is. Oh, we lost you. Hello?
Oh, sorry
there
about that.
There you are. No, it's okay. It's totally okay. Just wanted to make sure. Yeah. Yes. Exactly. I want to make sure we're all caught up then while we have this second. I dissociate if I get mad. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people do. Yeah. Were you about to say something and I interrupted you?
No, go ahead.
Okay. I was going to take another question from the audience. They asked, the question, is it misbehaving? This was from Narradim. A lot of evil characters these days have good points and motivation. For example, my favorite villain these days is Dracula from the Netflix movie, because in my sight, his opinion of the world is justified. Would I agree with his methods? No. But I can understand it and follow his way to feeling better.
That's a show I haven't watched, but there's so many things I need to get caught up on.
I don't know if this is Dracula as much as it's making me think of they did a cartoon of oh shoot, the video game with Simon who
Castlevania,
yeah. Did you watch that?
No, it's on my to watch list.
That was yes, thank you so much. Yes. That was freaking brutal to watch, but I think that's the Dracula they're referring to. I meant the Castlevania show. All right, I nailed it. Yeah, but they show you in the beginning. So this is not a spoiler, everybody. This is the premise of the show. They show you in the beginning that Dracula, his only reason to live is this woman who's immortal. She kind of sweeps him off his feet, and she doesn't expect that somebody so clever could come around, and then she is burned at the stake by the church for being a witch. Okay. And so naturally, as you do when you're Dracula, you start raining blood on people and sending...
You get pretty angry.
Yeah, and you send like bloodhounds and like three-headed dogs, and dead people after the living. Yeah, the whole thing. So I think that's the background that you needed in order to understand. Like,
Yeah.
anybody can relate to that loss of love, right? Or that something taken away from you and you're just feeling immense pain over it.
But if we only look at that character at face value, because generally people will think Dracula equals blood-sucking vampire equals
Right.
bad. But if you don't look into that backstory, you understand where that character's motivations come from. You don't really understand who that character is. And that's kind of one of the parts of superhero therapy. And everyone can be seen at face value. Our behaviors can be seen at face value. But sometimes we don't do a behavior because we want to, but we do it because we feel we need to. And sometimes our behaviors are not necessarily voluntary. We will do behaviors as a way to avoid possible negative consequences that our mind has drummed up.
I think you also bring up another good point. Our negatives are not like our character flaws do not make up who we are as a person. Like that's not when they try to create a, three-dimensional character in a TV show, they fail when they show something like that because they're just saying, well, this man is now justified in all of his actions and who he is as a person because of this thing that was done to him, when as in reality that's still a character flaw, but we're basically defining him by it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because all of our behaviors go through two things. So it's a triad.
Okay.
Our thoughts or our cognitions generate emotions, and then those emotions generate behavior. And those behaviors can go one of two ways. They can take us towards the person that we want to be. So we call those forward moves, or take us away from the person we want to be. So they are away moves. Those away moves make us feel good in the short term. They help us feel better immediately. Using substances, where it be drugs or alcohol, helps in the moment. Avoiding social situations help in the moment, but it takes us away from the person we want to be. If you want to have more friends, have a more active social life, but you're always avoiding going out to social events, you're going to perpetuate a cycle of feeling more depressed and more lonely.
So your behavior does not. So your behavior is not lining up with your desires.
Exactly.
Therefore,
The behavior is a safety mechanism.
Okay.
Because a lot of the things that we do and the way our brain kind of works is always in kind of threat analysis mode.
Okay.
Does this situation have the potential to cause me harm?
Right.
Harm in that metaphoric sense.
Right.
If I go do this, will it hurt? We don't really know. Yes or no. But a lot of people will not take the chance of getting hurt. So they will emotionally avoid. So emotional avoidance is that away move. You go away from the possibility of pain, but you stay stuck in that feeling of loneliness. So people will look at that behavior at face value of, oh, that person never comes out. That person is, quote unquote, a hermit. But if we dig deeper, they may just suffer from crippling anxiety.
Right.
They may have social anxiety. They may have self-esteem issues. They may have relationship issues or X, Y, or Z. The more we dig down and understand what drives a behavior, because a behavior is never isolated.
Right.
It comes through emotion that is generated by thoughts.
Yeah. So, but the person who is kind of taking anxiety and then saying this is okay, so I'm going to act this way because I believe that this will make me feel better, ultimately is still hurting themselves. So, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you don't recognize.
Self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yes, self-fulfilling prophecy. So how do you put an end to that? Is there a way?
So there are two lines of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
We can go through the behavior route, or we can go through the cognitive route.
Okay.
I am more of the cognitive sense. We can work on changing behavior, but if we change behavior, it's just going to pop out somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a hydra. Chop off one head, it's going to pop out somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
The way to deal with anxiety is to understand, well, why do you suffer from anxiety? Where does it come from?
Right.
What thoughts does it generate?
Yeah, and if you don't get to therapy, you're never gonna find out, though.
Exactly.
Right.
That's why I highly advise for a lot of people to go seek a mental health professional, even if you don't suffer from a clinical disorder. Seeing a therapist can help in a multitude of aspects in your life.
Yeah, I mean, seeing a therapist to me, even without, so I continue seeing a therapist even though I'm in remission with most of my I mean, not so much depression, anxiety, but still, but I continue seeing a therapist on some basis. And at this point, we just talk about how I am processing things and like learning new ways and new ways to look at things that I wouldn't have thought of otherwise without their help. So I mean, we advise seeing a therapist like on the show. Just, I think I say it once an episode. I certainly freaking hope so. But yeah. Tiger's Fun, best wishes on you in finding a therapist. You know how I feel about that. Aw. Okay, so our next question is from Kid Carbon. What defines a superhero over a villain? Is it simply the confines of the law, or is there a moral aspect to it? And where does this sit with superhero therapy?
Well, we have to look at the perception of the person. So the villain typically doesn't really think they are the villain.
Like a narcissist. I'm sorry.
Some of them are narcissists, but in their mind, they can believe that they're doing the right thing. Like I mentioned, a villain's behavior shouldn't just be isolated to their behavior. What is driving that behavior? You can make a one-dimensional villain. Oh, that person is bad, so he does bad things. But a complex villain, and one that's relatable, their behavior generally is driven by a lot of other things. If we look at one of the most popular villains lately, it's Thanos through Avengers.
And then suddenly, yeah, you go from, that's a great example, because you go from in the beginning of the movie of him just being a bad guy to, as the movie goes on, you kind of learn for his reasons. And then suddenly you don't necessarily agree with him, but you could see his perspective, and just being able to look at it from his perspective is enough for people to like start scratching their heads.
In his mind, Thanos is a hero.
Right.
Because he wants to save the universe. Because he's looking at overcrowding. If we just look at the Earth has a overcrowding problem. Just because we are using more resources that we have. So using Thanos' logic, it's good logic to cut the world's population in half, and you save half of the population rather than the entirety of it being wiped out.
Right.
In a nutshell, it's easy to see it that way. So I may not agree with the means, but we can look at it that way.
Right. Goosebumps. Every time I think of Thanos, he's definitely created some thoughts that I've been like, for lack of, to simply put it, just been uncomfortable with, where I'm like, I don't disagree, but it's not right. There's a Dan Brown book too. I think they made a movie out of it. I don't remember if they did or not with this one, but it's based on Dante's Inferno. And basically, basically the whole idea is the same, that we're overpopulated, and therefore this like villain wants to create a concoction that like reduces fertility for the
Mhm.
for like everybody, and that's what's going to reduce the population. And those are the kind of things where I don't it's not it's such a tiny, I think the thing to focus on is that that's such a tiny microscopic piece of the whole picture, right? Overpopulation, like there's thousands of other solutions, but there's also so many other things to that piece.
Mhm. If we look, one of the main shows that are going on right now is the Handmaid's Tale.
Oh god, yes.
That's very politically driven. Again, don't look at what they're doing at face value. Look at it a little bit deeper. What's driving the behavior? With them, there is a fertility issue in society.
Right.
They believe that what they're doing is saving the human race. It may be misguided,
Right.
but in their way, it's a way to solve that particular problem.
Well, what these things have in common is it's usually to a detriment or in a tyrannical way to others. It's instead of finding a solution that is all inclusive, you basically say, well, I'm going to take this piece of the population and use create fear around them so that people act a certain way thereafter.
Mm-hmm. Well, it goes to the question of humanity. So if you look at Nolan's The Dark Knight,
Mm-hmm.
in one of the final scenes is the boat sequence where you
Mm-hmm.
have the general population and
Right.
you have the inmates.
Right. The two boats with the inmates and and they each have a radio, right? No, they each have a detonator, right, that controls the other boats' bombs, supposedly.
Exactly.
Right.
So that social experiment is who's going to kill who, and most of the population thought, well, they're criminals and they won't think twice to hurt us
Right.
and to save themselves, so we should hurt them.
Right.
And the whole game for the Joker at that time was, I want to kind of skew people's perception on humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And when you boil it down, the people that were most human at that time were the criminals.
Right.
Because they realized what they had done. And we can go into a big debate on what they were doing,
Mm-hmm.
but it focuses on why. Focuses on, I want to save me. And people will innately want to save themselves. It's a human trait.
Well,
And
we
when
need
you're
it.
primed-
We
and
need
when
it.
you're primed with your own mortality,
Mm-hmm.
there's a theory called terror management theory.
Mm-hmm.
When someone is primed with their own mortality, they innately become more conservative in terms of their worldview, in terms of their own social group, and more protective of that group, and goes into an in-group, out-group.
Mm-hmm.
They are criminals. They made their choice. We are more important. They should die. But again, that's taking away that basic human right to live. A criminal may have done something bad, but it doesn't mean they are a bad person.
Right.
Working with inmates, when I worked in an institution, a lot of the guys that I saw were people that were not bad people. They just made bad decisions given bad life circumstances.
Right. The whole, well, there's almost no other way that it could have went because of how their life was lining up.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
But coming back to that original argument is, a lot of people will just look at their behavior at face value.
Right.
And it might be the shrink in me, but if you look past a person's behavior, you look deep down into who they are as a person,
Mm-hmm.
everyone has a semblance of humanity somewhere inside.
Hmm.
No one is innately bad.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, I strongly agree with that, and I love that. I can debate that philosophy for a while. I mean, I probably wouldn't. I would be on the side of I believe in the same thing, but it's interesting to see a professional who has worked with the inmate population say that. One of the first trolls that we had here, probably now a year and a half ago or something, came in and said, you haven't seen what I've seen. You haven't seen the people that I've seen. People with mental illnesses do not deserve to be to feel better, especially the ones that I have seen in the prison system, like the way they act. So at the time I was a green newbie streamer and didn't know better and hadn't done my research, and so I started crying because I was like, I don't agree with you. I believe everybody has good in them, and I just sat there and cried. It was terrible. The whole situation is terrible. I don't 0 out of 10 do not recommend the whole circumstance. But
I actually have an example for that.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of Vince Lee?
Sounds really familiar.
Okay, I haven't worked with him, but I read some case files and kind of read through who he was by periphery. So Vince Lee was someone that decapitated someone on a Greyhound bus in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Okay.
So he's a diagnosed paranoid schizophrenic.
Okay.
So automatically people hear paranoid schizophrenic and they see that person is dangerous.
Sure.
Statistics show that someone that suffers from paranoid schizophrenia or any mental health disorders are more likely to be victims than the perpetrator.
Yes.
And with Vince Lee, there was one caveat to that. So with paranoid schizophrenics, they're generally docile. They are more of a danger to themselves than they are to other people. But with schizophrenia, you have hallucinations, whether they be audio or visual or tactile. But with Vince Lee, one of the things that he had was command hallucinations. I don't know if you've played through Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice.
I haven't, but I do know a lot about it. And I actually went through a mental health first aid exercise on what you're about to say, I'm pretty sure. But go, I want you to finish.
So, one, I highly recommend everyone to play that game.
Yes, it is. It
illustrates the big point that I'm making. So within Hellblade, there are command hallucinations. So voices that are telling you what you're seeing, what you need to do. And they can be very convincing. And what happened with Vince Lee, he was on a Greyhound bus, and that command hallucination was telling him that the person that he beheaded later was a spy, was with the government, and he was there to kill him.
Sure.
And the whole rhetoric that came through his mind is, it's either him or me.
Sure. And when you look at it from his perspective, you're like, well, that was almost self-defense against something that wasn't there.
Exactly.
But at the end of the day, this guy's missing his head. So. Yeah.
But with Vince Lee, he was found what's called NCR, which is called non-criminally responsible, due to his mental health condition. If he would not have had that command hallucination at that time, he most likely would not have done what he did.
Right.
But because of that command hallucination, and he didn't jump on the occasion, he fought and fought and fought against it until he was almost ultimately pushed into a corner. So if you think about any animal, any dog, if they be docile at all, push them into a corner, what will that dog do?
Attack, right.
They're not angry, they're not malicious. They're just defending themselves. And that's what Vince Lee did. So
it's your defense against what mental. I see it and I see it and I don't, only because what I've been taught, and this is very different. I've never lived in the shoes of a schizophrenic, obviously, but what I've
with Vince Lee, it's a very isolated extreme situation.
Yeah. But one of the things, so on a maybe more common I can use myself as a more common example because my thoughts are my worst thoughts are suicidal ideation and depression and all that. So on that level, like I have felt that feeling of my thoughts are telling me the only way out is by ending my own life. Like
those thoughts can be really powerful,
and they are. And there have been a few times in my life where, I mean, there were terrible times, and there were times which where I was kind of saved by the fact that I had a good therapist, and I would call my therapist and I would say I'm thinking these things. And it's really easy to get that far and that deep before somebody tells you they're just thoughts. And in my case, they are just that, it's, again, I've never lived with schizophrenia or would pretend to know what that experience is like. But it's what I can understand, where I can put myself in somebody else's shoes, is that feeling of, well, I'm thinking, therefore I must have to do this thing.
And with command hallucinations, they are so vivid, they are so real, that the person, they feel the only way to survive is to do that. And again, statistically, they are more at risk at harming themselves than harming others.
Yeah.
But media's portrayal of schizophrenia, of psychopathy, is serial killers.
Yes. There's not a good.
No.
Yeah. Well, with any portrayal of any mental illness, like I'm even thinking of one of the movies that I actually decently look forward to and like enjoy is Silver Linings Playbook. And in it, the main character has bipolar disorder, but he's extremely violent. And he is so in the book as well, that it's based on. And the book is supposed to be based on real events. But, once again, it's a depiction not in favor of anybody.
And with bipolar disorder, if you're properly medicated, things can go peachy.
Right. Yeah, and that you don't see that. We went off the main topic, but I absolutely love it. You guys, if you have any remaining questions, is it okay if I keep you for a few more minutes, Dr. Goku?
Yeah, go ahead.
Awesome. So if you guys have any remaining questions, now is the time to ask them. Somebody asked, how do you think that characters actually help us when we're growing up?
Well, depending on the situations, you can gravitate to a character that you associate with. So I use the example of Spider-Man. Of seeing that character having all of these powers, but being bullied.
Right.
But seeing all of the things that he's able to do.
Right.
You can see it as a way of, I see the similarities that he's going through, I see the parallels, and I can get through it too.
Right.
I can take some of those life lessons and use it to help me go through things. What my thesis mainly looked at was, if you have a strong parasocial relationship, in certain aspects, you will generally have greater pro-social behaviors.
Right.
So pro-social behaviors is the act of helping someone else. And a lot of that, because of the heroes that we see, they are helping others.
Right.
We can learn a lot from those characters.
Kid Carbon asks a follow-up question. What character do you identify with the most, if you don't mind sharing?
With me, when I was a kid, it was between Batman, Spider-Man, and Goku.
Oh.
Hence the name.
Hence the name. Man, that's a good trifecta. They're all kind of the same but different. I mean, they're different in many ways, but I could see there's I could see the common thread still. Yeah, you guys in chat, share away. I want to know what your characters were. So when I turned 14, I remember my understanding of like characters and what I was interested, like the complexity that I was interested in changed. And so the ones I identified the most were Black Widow and Deadpool.
Okay.
But as a kid, Spider-Man was like everything to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it meant a lot to have. So Tobey Maguire, until whatever it was that Spider-Man 3 was, I still...
we don't talk about Spider-Man 3.
I still don't know what happened to me in that theater. I was assaulted visually, but Spider-Man made a lot. Howard the Duck, really? Oh my gosh. Mine growing up was Spock, and then Data. Yes, Jinx. I did have that was another one that like late in my later years, I so related to Data specifically. He was a really, because there's that idea that like you're almost human, but you don't get it. You don't get it just enough. Like I don't know, and I think it was part of it was also because I moved here from Russia. And so I always felt that like otherness, like everybody else was human and I was this other thing.
Okay. Have you ever looked at Superman?
Yes, there's actually. So have you read Red Sun? Or I don't know if that's what it's called. I think it's called Red Sun, Superman Red Sun, or.
I may have read it a long time ago.
Do you know what I'm talking about? It's basically if Superman was communist.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one I remember. That one really got me too. But why Superman? Because he's literally an alien too?
Well, if you look at Superman, not at the core of, not the face value of the character, but who he is at the core. Superman is the ultimate immigrant. So if you look at who created Superman, so they were two Jewish immigrants from Canada.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So they immigrated from the EU, coming down to Canada, and they created Superman as that ultimate immigrant. So the American way and the American ideals of the time. Mm-hmm. So that American dream. Mm-hmm. And Superman embodied that, being able to come from essentially another planet.
Right.
Taken in by this family, learning these values, working hard, even though he has all of these powers, but using them in a positive way.
And keeping himself as human as possible. Yeah.
And when you look at the latest Justice League movie, a lot of people give it flack. But when you look at it from a psychological perspective, Batman has, or Batfleck has a good.
How do you feel about Batfleck? I guess we should lay that law down right now. How do you feel about Batfleck?
I really liked Ben Affleck as Batman.
I did too. I didn't think he was that bad.
I prefer Ben Affleck, and people will give me flack for this, over Christian Bale.
Ooh, sorry, that's the wrong answer, and that's our show tonight.
I liked Christian Bale, but I preferred Ben Affleck's Batman per se.
I think he's closer to Batman than Christian Bale. Christian Bale is a whole nother iteration of Batman that's unlike anything the comics ever presented to us.
Exactly. It's a different type of Batman.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so is George Clooney, but here we are.
We don't talk about Batman and Robin. But when you look at that Justice League movie, Ben Affleck and Bruce Wayne's character made a good comment of Superman and Clark was more human than he was. So whereas Superman is this alien coming from another planet,
right?
He tried so hard to be human, whereas Batman distanced himself from everything that was human.
Right. That's interesting. That's kind of how I tell people that, like, I feel like I get a little bit more defensive about the U.S. and like my patriotism for it, because I'm like, I chose to come here. So when people talk about politics, like I won't defend stupidity or anything, but like, you know, when people do say like, oh, America sucks or whatever, I'm like, I don't know. I chose to come here. Don't tell me that my decision was shitty.
And when you look at Superman, Clark Kent is the mask.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at Batman, Bruce Wayne is the mask.
Right. He's truly himself as Batman, not.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So
Ooh.
Superman is more human than Batman.
Ooh. Ooh, I like that. How do you feel about Green Lantern? Do you have any opinions? Not the movie. The movie didn't happen.
Oh, the movie was bad.
The movie was so. I had such high hopes. I had just finished reading Darkest Day and Brightest. Darkest Day, Brightest Night was about to come out, and I sat in that seat, and then I walked out of there being like, what has happened?
What was that?
What was that? Yeah.
Which Green Lantern are we talking about?
Hal. Hal.
If we go Hal, he's kind of that tortured soul, and like multiple superheroes, they have to.
But he's also a playboy. He's kind of he's not really the Iron Man. But sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
He's similar, but he just got the humility knocked into him.
Right.
He was thrusted into this role that is much greater than he is. Similar to Captain Marvel. He believed that she was this small person in this small group, learning that she has a much bigger role to play in the universe.
Right. Ooh. Well, and there's I don't know if you've read Miss Marvel, but
I haven't read the comics.
Oh, they're fantastic. They're so good. And I read them like in my later, it came out I think when I was 25, and I'm obsessed with this high school girl with Camilla Khan. She's fantastic, and I feel like I've dealt with some problems through her, and again, she's in high school, so figure that out. But
sometimes we can see the parallels in our own life.
Yeah. Vicem says, Superman comes from another planet, but fits perfectly in with our human ideals of beauty, which is kind of funny. It's not like he came with tendrils, puzzling musculature, and discomforting color. Right. He's not like something out of Men in Black, but...
It's because it's comics.
Yeah. He had to be handsome. I don't know if you've ever seen, there's it's with Elijah Wood. It's a YouTube short. It's called the Rise and Fall of Superman.
No, I haven't seen it.
It's fantastic. It's like 20 minutes long, and Elijah Wood plays like I think cyborg Superman, if I'm not mistaken. But It's just like this random YouTube video, and Elijah Wood shows up in it. But one of the things that they showed is like people of the 1940s, and they're like, listen, when Superman came out, flying was absolutely off the table as a thing that you could do. And they show this guy wearing a trench coat with like 3 cigarettes in his mouth, going, "He's flying? That's impossible!" So like what I'm trying to say is we got to give the Times a little bit slack. Also. He had to be handsome. I mean, it's not sexist, but again, give the Times some slack. Yeah.
Well, if you look at, I'm trying to remember the movie that just came out not too long ago by not the Russo brothers, but the Gunn brothers, about, I don't remember the name, about the evil Superman. Just came out like a month ago. They can't say it's Superman for licensing purposes.
Then I don't know. I don't think I know. But it's like all intents and purposes, it's evil Superman.
Well, it's a kid that gets it's an alien that drops in a pod that gets found by an elderly couple that has superpowers, and then gets activated like Goku did in the early Dragon Ball to wreak havoc.
Brightburn is the name of the movie. Okay.
Thank you. It goes on a murdering spree. So it's kind of an Elseworld story on Superman.
Okay. I could talk about this forever. Just like go through every movie in my conscious and go through them and figure out all the characters. And there's a reason that, do you have a take actually before I give my take, or don't give my take at all? But do you have a thought as to why the most recent Wonder Woman resonated so well with everybody, even compared to like the other DC movies?
One, it was good.
Yes. I mean, yes. There was a plot. She had a personality. All right. Those things. Yeah.
But two is seeing a strong female lead
Yeah.
also resonates. And Wonder Woman's part of that holy trinity of superheroes.
Right.
So Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman. But she comes from a much different place than the other two characters. She's a lot more similar to Superman than she ends up at Batman.
Right.
But they did the character so well in terms of a person out of place in the world,
Mm-hmm.
but having that moral center. And I
Mm.
feel a lot of people gravitated towards that in terms of this person, even with all of these superpowers, still has a lot to learn,
Mm-hmm.
but is doing everything that she can for people that she does not know.
Right. Right. Like she's acting for the good of mankind, even though she doesn't necessarily, like, she has no attachment to these people. They're not her people. And
Yeah, even though she learned that mankind is bad.
right. Oh, there's that really big piece. Right. And the whole showdown in the end with Professor Lupin. I don't want
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to give it away, but I think I just did. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, Wonder Woman, in when she was actually created, was created by a psychologist back in the day.
Oh, there's some trivia, you guys. I didn't know. That's neat. All right. Well, she was also one of the first like women out there. Yeah. She.
In same way that Captain Marvel really resonated, either good or bad, with a lot of people.
Right.
I know people kind of give the movie flack for being too social justice warrior type thing, but it's important for girls to have these strong female characters.
Right.
And that's the reason in Endgame, so spoiler, that they had that big panning shot of all
of all the women. They like took a moment to highlight all the female characters. People talked about that and gave it shit too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And a lot of people will complain that games are becoming too PC. Of why does this character have to be X or Y or Z? And most traditional video game characters are straight white males.
Right.
There's a lot more to the world than straight white males. And I being one, I can say that there's a lot more to the world than straight white males.
I don't know that and the response I have to PC is like, hey, I usually go into like, hey, growing up, did you, like, when you played Castlevania, did you think of yourself as Simon? When you played, Legend of Zelda, did you put yourself in Link's shoes? Now imagine you are somebody, and in Dr. Anthony Bean's book did a really good job touching upon this. But as much as a woman, I could still relate to the power and the tenacity that Link has, and I could still see parts of myself in him. That's not the same as me playing as Tomb Raider and having that character, like literally watching her go through stuff and be strong and hack away and solve puzzles and all of that. Like, it's a totally different experience for me. I'm way more immersed in it.
It's one thing that the original Mass Effect trilogy did well. We don't speak of Andromeda, but the original Mass Effect trilogy is you can play as male or femshep and have two different storylines, but you can make Shepard your own. And it's one of those powerful games of you're not playing necessarily as a character, you're becoming that character. You're becoming more emotionally invested in making choices like you would. You can go a full rogue playthrough because you're making that choice, but you can also make choices like you would do. And being able to look the way you want to helps immerse you more into that character.
Right. It's just that much more.
And people need to have those characters that they can relate to. Like you mentioned, you can relate to some aspects of Link, but being able to see certain things with Lara Croft, you just click or relate a lot more because you can see yourself more in her.
Right. And the same thing goes to books. And yeah, it's the difference between, like, I read Harry Potter and you're rooting for the character and you're in the character's shoes and you're thinking like him and the romance he goes through and the terrible things he goes through. But then, like, how many girls identified more with Hermione than Harry? Yeah.
It's kind of a testament to J.K. Rowling's writing as well.
Well, yeah, she's just a god. That's a different story. So if you guys don't have any further questions, we've had Dr. Goku on for longer than I promised him he would be on. So we could definitely let him go at this point. Here's your kind of 5 final minutes to ask your question. Yes, Breath of the Wild does have a very good message, and actually the Nintendo creators brought up the point that at one point one of the quests is that Link has to look like a woman in order to get through a village, and they talked about that because they realized they didn't have enough female characters in the game, and so they wanted to for girls to further relate to Link than they would normally, and like that was put there specifically for that purpose. Yeah.
If I remember, wasn't there a mod for Breath of the Wild that you can actually play as a female version of Link? Someone created a mod for it.
I don't know if there's a mod for it. Linkella is a real character. Linkle. Okay. Linkle is her name. Okay. But she's in Hyrule Warriors. Like, she's an actual character in Hyrule Warriors, and you have to play through a bunch of levels as her.
Okay.
But she's like a separate character. I don't know if there was a mod for Breath of the Wild. I would love to see it. Dawnstar, we did talk about the Kilgrave Affect. We did talk about that already. Nintendo's doing a good job with the players' mental health in mind. Absolutely. Yes. Seen the Breath of the Wild female mod a few days ago on YouTube. Quite interesting stuff. Awesome. Do you have any... This was cool. Thank you for letting me pick your brain and continuously just like answering all these questions. I appreciate it endlessly. Do you have any closing remarks? Any like last point you want to make sure that everybody knows before you hop off?
Well, not really. If people are interested to kind of follow us more at Project Guardians, you can kind of find us on Twitter, on Discord.
Posting that now.
Our shows typically are on Thursday nights, and we post the podcast later on in the following week. And on those off weeks, we have the Let's Talk streams. We're also working on me and our and Hatchy Dave, which is our project artist, on turning a lot of the character profiles that I do in downloadable PDFs with graphics. I know we have a couple of them up on our website, and there's a lot of them in the works. So if people want to kind of delve into character's backstory and a little bit more of a psychological perspective on the character, we have that. And I'm also working on too many things at the same time, but working on some YouTube videos to kind of
awesome.
Work through mental health and superhero therapy with that as well.
That is awesome. You guys, I've been fawning over like everything Dr. Goku's doing, so please support me in saying that is awesome. The website is a great way to see all the links and resources. Yeah, and so I always send people to Twitter because everything links out then from Twitter, so that's an easy way, but Dawnstar, I
also recommend to look up superhero therapy. Dr. Scarlett and her husband have a podcast called Superhero Therapy, and that they go into a lot of pop culture, a lot of movies and TV shows. And right now they're going through a chapter by chapter analysis of Harry Potter.
Oh my God, there's so many Hufflepuffs in this chat right now, and Slytherins and Gryffindors. I can't even begin to describe. So
yeah, I think they're on chapter 9 of Philosopher's Stone.
Yeah. Thanks.
So I highly recommend checking them out.
That's awesome. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for being on. I appreciate you.
It was my pleasure.
Endlessly. If we didn't pick your brain too much, I would love to have you back and continue bothering you on this subject, because I feel like it's just like an endless supply of questions. So
let me know and we'll work it out.
Awesome. You guys, once again, thank you so much for being on. I will be RB in a few minutes. please stick around. We're going to be looking at videos of puppies because today was a hard day. And we're also going to talk about mental health and you know, just the events of today. And we're going to be digesting them. So stick around for that. I love y'all. And don't forget to be the light. Okay.
Bye.